Hey everybody, Jake here from Bearded Gear, and I wanted to do kind of a re-review of this knife a little bit. I guess not so much the knife, but my Maxamet Para3 recently got Extreme Makeover Knife Edition. There's a video of me installing these scales and this hardware, and so I wanted to do kind of a review, pardon me, of these Rips Garage Tech blue denim micarta scales, or blue jean micarta, I forget which one they call it. Anyways, it's made from blue jeans, and it's also wearing Flytanium bronze anodized hardware, and of course a Lynch clip. It's my go-to on the Para3, and yeah, this knife is it feels like a totally different knife in a lot of ways now. So I figured I would give you guys a more legitimate review of this guy, since all I've done so far is show me put the scales on. So let's talk about how they actually are. I'm gonna hop in front of the camera, but I wanted to start out by giving you some close-ups before I just jabber on about it. So this is the knife in all of its beautiful glory. I love the way this turned out. I have been calling it apple bottom jeans ever since I put these on, and I love this nickname, or that nickname for this knife. I think it just fits it super well. So this, my friends, is apple bottom jeans, and I'm gonna hop in front of the camera. All right, so this knife, as I mentioned, feels very different now. Not that different, because it's still the shape and profile, and it's still very much a Para3. In fact, these scales, in terms of their dimensions, feel the same to me as the G10 scales that came off of it. The way that the liners nest, every bit as perfect as the factory scales. The way that this knife is centered, every bit as perfect as it was. The action, fantastic. I do have the tiniest bit of lock stick now. You can probably hear a little bit of a click as I disengage that. That's something I may just need to adjust though. So I don't think that's the scale's fault. I think that's my reassembly's fault. In fact, when I put the black hardware in, now that I'm thinking about it, I had a little bit of lock stick then too. So I probably just need to kind of dial this in a little bit better. But in the meantime, it's fully functional. There's virtually no, like just the tiniest bit of side-to-side play, and I've got total drop shutty, fantastic action. The weight on this guy still feels like it did before to me. It doesn't feel noticeably lighter. It certainly doesn't feel heavier. I would say maybe it's a hair lighter than it was, but that's hard for me to determine without using an actual scale. The biggest difference is just the feel of this knife in hand. This micarta is really well finished. It's got a nice level of kind of like natural texture to it. There's no like machined in texture here. This is just the material itself and the way it's finished. And even now that kind of my oils of my hands have been soaking into it quite a bit, and I've carried it kind of a lot, frankly, it's like darkened up in a really nice way. It's got its kind of patina going, which I like, but it hasn't gotten less grippy than it was really right out of the packaging. I guess maybe when it was like fully just like almost white, it was like a really light gray when it came out, it might have had just a tad more texture, but it hasn't really lost its texture, which I found on some micarta. It feels like the more I rub it, the smoother it gets, whereas this still, it just kind of feels a little more resilient, if that makes any sense. But yeah, this is my first experience with Rips Garage Tech, and I jumped on it because there was a promotion in the Millie PM2 Para3 Facebook group, which if you're into these knives and you're not in that group, definitely join it. It's probably my favorite group on Facebook. Just a great, solid group of dudes. But they ran a promotion for people exclusively in the group. There was a day where we had a coupon code, and I got these for a steal. It was a really great deal. I want to say I paid right around 50 bucks for them. So literally what I paid for the hardware was about as much as what I paid for the scales themselves, which seems a little backwards, but I really wanted this brass hardware, and to be honest, the way that it all came together and the way it looks now, I think it was worth it. This knife aesthetically to me is so pleasing. There aren't really any defects in the micarta itself, other than I will say there's one spot here on the back. I don't know if you can see that. It's like a light spot, and it's a little bit raised on a material like carbon fiber or titanium. Something like that would really bother me. But with the nature of micarta and this being kind of like a more natural feeling material, I almost love it. That might sound crazy, and I'm not trying to like make excuses if this is a defect, but it almost feels like a distressed spot on actual denim or jeans, and I really like that about it. I think it's really cool that it's got this like lighter spot, because I have jeans that I've had for a long time and have character, and there's spots where they're worn and they're a little bit light, and other spots where they're darker, and this kind of feels like that to me. So I imagine if I got a little bit of sandpaper, I could really level that out. I don't know whether it's like a little bit of extra epoxy or just kind of a bubble in the material or what, but I think it looks cool. So I'm not aching to change it or anything like that. But yeah, overall, the changes to this knife were primarily aesthetic. I don't have an issue with the G10 that comes from Spyderco. In fact, I really like that G10. There's a reason why a lot of my Spydercos have stayed in their factory scales for a long time. But I took that little divot out of my factory scale, and it was also something I wanted to try. Lately, I'm having fun modding things and kind of making things my own a little bit more. And with this being my forever Para3 and the blade steel that I just want to use and love forever, it seemed like a worthy time to go ahead and make that little switch. So yeah, the build I'm super happy with. This hardware from Flytanium worked out perfect. It looks great. It functions exactly as it should. It switches literally everything except for the like internals of the pivot. So all of the screws, even the blade stop, the lanyard tube, even the clip screws are all exactly matched in this awesome even bronze coating. There's no defects on it. Even installing it and adjusting it and all that, I haven't had any kind of mars on any of the screws. It's done great. So I really like that hardware. The scales feel to the touch very different. Even though the profile, like I said, is the same, the feel of it, it's just it's a different knife in hand, and I really like it. It's a welcome change. I do think sometimes the grittiness of Spyderco G10, it's kind of like sandpapery nature, can be a little rough for some circumstances. And for this one, the Para3 being kind of a smaller EDC for me, I like that it's just that little bit smoother now. It goes in and out of the pocket a little bit easier. There's less resistance there. It's a little bit more comfortable somehow to carry because of that. And yeah, it just feels like it suits the nature of this knife a little more. I think on my Paramilitary 2, I'm probably more likely to keep those scales the same for a long time, because on that knife it feels a little bit like it should be grittier and grippier than the Para3. But just my philosophy of use between the two knives, I think this one being smoother, now that I've experienced it, it kind of feels like it should be smoother than a PM2. I don't know if that makes any sense at all, but I quite like it. I mentioned in my installation video kind of where my preferences lie between MXG and Lynch clips. I'll stand by what I said in that video. I give like a 10% preference to Lynch clips. I really like Lynch clips, especially the Para3 clip, the way he cuts them. I think it works great. The biggest gripe I have with the Para3 as a knife is how much preference they've given to a lanyard tube over the rest of the design. I don't use lanyards in knives, never plan on it, and I wish that it didn't have a lanyard tube at all. I think that would make this a much better design, frankly, and then the clip could actually ride relatively deep, even with the spoon clip on it, and then putting a deep carry clip on it would actually come to the butt of the knife, but that is what it is. If that's the only thing that I don't really like about the Para3, then so be it. But yeah, this Lynch clip is actually the one that was on this knife in its, like, right when I got the knife, I threw this on it over, I guess it was probably over a year ago now. So it's seen a lot of pocket time. There's some wear here on the bend where it's just scuffed up against a bunch of stuff. This knife has been in pocket a lot. Now, I think that with these scales, I almost love that this knife was already, or this clip was already worn in a little bit, that the finish was kind of like starting to patina, if that is a correct term to use there. But there's like a little bit of snail trailing and there's some scuffs. And I feel like with the way micarta is meant to kind of look weathered, it just came together really, really well. So I'm super happy with how this knife turned out. Each of the components feel every bit as nice, if not even a little bit nicer than the factory equipment that comes on it from Spyderco. So it's nice that there's these aftermarket options that aren't just little aesthetic tweaks, but don't function well. Because that's always been my fear of modding knives, is like, what if I put it on and it looks cool, but somehow it doesn't function right, and then I can't get the knife back together the way it was, and there's like this mental hurdle you have to get over to take the leap of faith and try out these components. But I'm really glad that I've got them on now, and that this knife feels every bit as solid. The tolerances feel every bit as tight. The placement of everything still feels right. The feel of it still feels like a Spyderco Para3, just enhanced. So yeah, it worked out really, really well. I'm happy with this build. Frankly, the way that this turned out, and the way that my Shaman recently turned out with those fireside scales, it makes me want to start modding more knives, because I'm finding that I like kind of dialing things in right to my preference. And I don't know how many other people there are that have a Maxamet Para3 with blue denim micarta scales and bronze hardware and this finished Lynch clip. There might be one or two others. Maybe there's 10 in the world. I don't know. There's a lot more people that have regular gray G10 satin hardware. Maxamet Para3 is the way that they came. So it's fun to me that mine's a little different, and it feels like it's mine, and I've kind of put my mark on it by building it the way I wanted it. So I really, really like this knife. I'm stoked about it. Kudos to each of the makers involved in getting this done, including Spyderco, because I love the Para3 as a platform. That was terrible. Let me redo that. There you go. But yeah, so this is the Maxamet Para3 wearing Rips Garage Tech blue denim micarta scales, Flytanium bronze anodized titanium hardware set, and a Lynch Para3 deep carry clip. And it's come together really well. So there you have it.